There's something women almost never say out loud about men who've moved on. And honestly, most men never realize it until it's too late. Because the moment a man truly moved on, everything changes. His energy changes, his presence changes, the way people see him changes. Suddenly, the man who was once ignored becomes unforgettable. Not because he begged for attention, but because he stopped needing it. And the craziest part? A lot of women secretly notice the shift long before they ever admit it. So if you're a man trying to rebuild himself, regain confidence, and understand the psychology behind attraction, respect, and emotional power, subscribe to the channel right now. This channel was made for men who want to become stronger mentally, emotionally, and financially. And we're getting closer to our goal of 1,000 subscribers. So join us before everyone else finds this channel first. Topic 1. Why a man becomes more attractive. The moment he stops chasing. There's something strange that almost no man notices at first. The harder he chases trying to impress people, the more invisible he becomes. And it's not because he lacks value. It's because needy energy almost always changes the vibe in the room. A man who constantly looks for validation ends up walking into every interaction trying to convince people of his worth. And ironically, that's exactly where part of his attraction starts fading without him even realizing it. A lot of men think attraction comes from non-stop effort, instant replies, unlimited availability, and constant attention. But in reality, everything changes when a man starts building a life that doesn't revolve around female validation. He starts hitting the gym because he wants to feel strong, not because he wants to post thirst traps online. He learns how to make money, improve his mental health, and read books like Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins or The Way of the Superior Man by David Dita. Not to impress someone, but because he got tired of living below his potential. And then something almost silent starts happening. His posture changes, his eyes change, his energy changes. He no longer replies instantly trying to keep every little bit of attention alive. He stops forcing conversations, stops begging for presence, stops living anxiously waiting for notifications to pop up. And the craziest part? A lot of women start noticing that man precisely when he stops trying to be noticed. Because the absence of neediness creates something rare these days, real presence. And that opens up a psychological dynamic most men don't understand until they experience it themselves. Topic 2. Women often notice your absence before they notice your presence. Some men spend months trying to be noticed, only to realize they were finally seen the moment they walked away. It sounds backwards, but human beings usually recognize the value of something only after it's no longer available. It's like silence in a house that used to be full of conversation. While it's there, nobody pays much attention to it. But once it disappears, suddenly the emptiness gets loud. A lot of women don't immediately realize the emotional impact of a consistent man, because constant presence slowly becomes part of the routine. The good morning texts, the attention, the emotional support, the little things he does every day, all of that gets absorbed without much reflection. But the moment that man stops chasing, stops reacting, and stops trying to maintain constant contact, something shifts inside her. Not necessarily because of ego or manipulation, but because absence creates comparison, and comparison creates awareness. And this is where many men ruin everything without realizing it. Because the silence starts working, and then anxiety kicks in. He sees one of her stories, misses her, sends an impulsive text at 2 in the morning, and completely destroys the new dynamic that was starting to form. Emotionally strong men understand something difficult. Not every feeling of missing someone needs to turn into action. Sometimes the biggest sign of maturity is sitting with discomfort without rushing to fix your loneliness. And interestingly enough, that's usually when the emotional tests start showing up. Topic 3. The dangerous mistake men make after a breakup. After a breakup, a lot of men fall into an emotional trap without even noticing it. They say they want to move on, but emotionally, they're still parked in the exact same place. They watch her stories hoping for a reaction. They send random texts for no reason. They create excuses to stay connected. And deep down, all of it comes from the quiet hope of staying present in her mind. The problem is that the more a man shows he can't let go, the more emotional dependency he communicates. And dependency rarely creates admiration. What makes this even more dangerous is that it almost never feels desperate to the guy doing it. In his mind, it's just a harmless conversation, a funny meme, a mature attempt to stay friends. But emotionally, the hidden message is usually something else. I still need your attention to feel okay. And people pick up on energy far more than words. A man can try to sound calm through text, but emotional anxiety always leaks through the details, the speed of his replies, the need to keep the conversation going, the inability to disappear for a few days. Men who truly move on understand something uncomfortable at first. Sometimes silence is more powerful than explanations. Not because they're playing mind games, but because they finally decided to protect their peace. They start focusing on training, work, purpose, routines, friends, travel, or even simple hobbies like boxing, running, or reading. And while some men keep trying to leave the emotional door cracked open, others quietly start building a life so strong they no longer need to go back anywhere. And that's exactly when certain female reactions become harder to ignore. Topic 4. The version of you she expected to stay broken. There's an unspoken expectation that happens after many breakups. Nobody says it directly, but a lot of people assume the other person will stay exactly the same. Stuck in pain, emotionally wrecked, replaying memories and trying to figure out what went wrong. And maybe that's why people get so surprised when they run into a man months later. Stronger, calmer, and completely different from the broken version they imagined. Pain, when used the right way, changes a man in an almost brutal way. Some guys turn rejection into fuel. They start waking up early, training even when they don't feel like it, learning new skills, taking care of their appearance, improving their finances, and rebuilding their identity little by little. Not because they want to prove something to someone, but because they finally realized how expensive it is to spend years emotionally lost. And the funny thing is that real growth is usually quiet. A truly focused man is often too busy working on himself to announce his transformation online. And then one of the most emotionally uncomfortable things starts happening. Some women begin looking at that man differently precisely when he's no longer trying to win them back. Because there's something incredibly powerful about someone who suffered, fell apart, and still rebuilt himself without bitterness, without revenge, without desperation. But very few men understand that this new version of themselves will also be tested. Because the moment life starts changing, certain people suddenly reappear trying to figure out whether that growth is real or just another temporary phase. Topic 5. Women rarely miss the man. They miss the feeling. This might be one of the hardest truths to accept after a relationship ends. A lot of times, the person isn't the only thing being missed. It's the feeling they created, the emotional comfort, the constant presence, the calm that man brought during difficult days. Some women miss the way he listened, the safety they felt around him, the peaceful energy that existed when they were together. And many men confuse that with thinking her missing him automatically means she wants to come back. The problem is that emotionally needy men often try to recreate the past by force. They want to relive old conversations, repeat old moments, bring back memories as if nostalgia alone could rebuild connection. But emotions don't work that way. What truly leaves a mark on people are deep emotional experiences. The man who made her laugh during a horrible day, the guy who stayed calm while everything around him was chaos, the man who made her feel safe without needing to control every situation. Those feelings stay in someone's mind much longer than romantic promises ever will. And here's where it gets interesting. When a man grows emotionally after heartbreak, he stops chasing validation and starts creating new experiences for himself. He travels more, meets different people, builds real confidence, and learns to enjoy his own company. And without realizing it, he starts giving off a much stronger energy than before. Because now he's no longer desperately trying to be loved. He's simply living his life. But that shift often sparks a quiet curiosity in some women, especially when they notice he no longer reacts the same way to the little emotional tests that used to completely shake him. Topic 6. When a man stops reacting, the dynamic changes completely. There's a specific moment when the entire dynamic changes, and most men don't even notice when it happens. It's when he stops reacting emotionally to everything. Before, every delayed text ruined his mood. Every random like turned into paranoia. Every bit of distance made him chase harder, trying to regain control of the situation. But emotionally strong men eventually learn something important. The person who reacts the most gives away their emotional balance to other people. When a man learns how to control his emotions, he starts radiating something rare these days: stability. And emotional stability has way more impact than looks, pickup lines, or cheap psychological games. It's the guy who can hear something painful without exploding. The man who doesn't turn every conversation into emotional chaos. The guy who knows how to stay quiet without feeling the need to win every argument. Ironically, many men think this will make them seem cold, but usually the opposite happens. They start looking more masculine, more grounded, and much harder to manipulate emotionally. And here's the interesting part. When a man stops reacting impulsively, some women begin testing this new version of him without even realizing it. An unexpected text appears. An old story gets viewed. A casual conversation suddenly starts out of nowhere. Not necessarily out of malice, but because real change sparks emotional curiosity. People want to know whether that calm version of him is genuine or just temporary. And a lot of guys fail right there because they don't realize some tests aren't about words at all. They're about silent emotional control. Topic 7. Some women test. If you've truly moved on. Most men think an emotional test is going to look obvious, almost like a movie scene. But in real life, it's usually way more subtle than that. Sometimes it starts with a random like after weeks of silence. A "hey, this reminded me of you." A harmless reply to a story, or even a casual conversation asking how he's doing. And the problem is that many men instantly interpret those moments as proof of romantic interest, when in reality, it's often just emotional curiosity trying to figure out whether he's still available. When someone realizes they've lost emotional access to a person, it's natural to test whether the door is still open. This happens in friendships, relationships, and even in business. Human beings struggle to accept permanent change, and that's exactly why so many men end up destroying their own progress. Because it only takes 2 affectionate messages for them to suddenly go back to acting like the insecure version of themselves they were trying to leave behind. They cancel priorities, become anxious, waiting for replies, and fall back into the same exhausting emotional cycle they thought was already over. Mature men understand that moving on doesn't mean becoming cold or ignoring someone out of pride. It simply means not sacrificing your peace for tiny pieces of attention. Sometimes he replies politely, but without forcing the connection to continue. Other times he realizes certain attempts at reconnecting are driven more by ego, loneliness, or curiosity than genuine intentions. And the more a man learns to observe behavior instead of just listening to words, the more he starts noticing a quiet kind of respect growing, because very few things change female perception more than a man who finally learns how to choose himself. Topic 8. The silent respect women develop for men who choose themselves. There's a type of respect that doesn't come from good looks, money, or smooth words. It comes from a man showing through his actions that he's not willing to abandon his life just to keep someone's attention. And honestly, that's rare these days. A lot of men sacrifice their routines, peace of mind, self-respect, and even personal goals just to avoid losing an emotional connection. But the more someone abandons himself trying to be chosen, the less value he quietly communicates. Men who choose themselves operate differently. They keep training even when they're emotionally drained. They keep chasing their goals even while missing someone. They maintain discipline, routines, friendships, and purpose without making relationships the center of their entire existence. And strangely enough, that creates a powerful psychological effect. Because real confidence doesn't come from sounding confident. It comes from remaining emotionally intact after disappointment. It's the man who hurts but doesn't collapse. The man who misses someone but doesn't lose his dignity trying to fill emotional emptiness immediately. And maybe the most interesting part is this. Many women will rarely admit out loud how much they respect emotionally balanced men, especially the men who manage to move on without becoming bitter, revenge-driven, or desperate for validation. Because masculine maturity creates calmness, and calmness creates strength. But there's a huge difference between looking peaceful and truly being at peace. Many men learn how to hide emotions while still being emotionally trapped inside. And that's where real healing begins, separating the men who only pretend to move on from the men who actually set themselves free from the past. Topic 9. Most men think moving on means forgetting. It doesn't. Most men think moving on means completely erasing someone from memory. Like healing means waking up one day feeling absolutely nothing. But real life doesn't work that way. Some people leave emotional scars that stay with you for years, and pretending they never existed usually makes the process even harder. Mature men understand that healing isn't about forgetting the past. It's about no longer living emotionally trapped inside it. Some guys move on physically, but emotionally they're still living in the exact same place they were months ago. Their body goes to work, hangs out with friends, posts smiling pictures online. But their mind is still replaying old conversations, imagining scenarios and waiting for hidden signs. And that drains energy in a silent way. Because while a man stays emotionally attached to what he lost, he stops building what he could still become. That's why so many men feel strangely empty even after they moved on. The problem was never just missing the person. It was struggling to let go of a version of life that no longer exists. True freedom begins when a man stops fighting his memories and learns how to live with them without being controlled by them. He realizes he can remember without suffering, miss someone without chasing them, and respect the past without returning to it. And that completely changes his energy, because now his decisions no longer come from neediness, guilt, or emotional dependency. But there's one final stage of this transformation that very few men ever truly reach. The moment he realizes he no longer needs to prove anything to anyone, because he finally found peace inside his own life. Topic 10. Why the man who truly moved on wins in silence. At the end of the day, the man who truly moved on is almost never the loudest one in the room. He's not the guy constantly trying to make someone jealous. He's not the man posting indirect messages, fake happiness, or trying to show everyone that he won the breakup. In fact, emotionally healed men usually become quieter, because when someone genuinely finds peace, they stop feeling the need to convince the world of it. And honestly, that might be one of the strongest forms of masculine confidence. Some men spend years trying to prove their worth to people who already chose to walk away, and without realizing it, they turn their entire life into a search for emotional validation. But eventually, some men get tired of that. They realize the real victory was never making someone regret losing them. The real victory is getting their energy back, sleeping peacefully, looking in the mirror without shame, and feeling proud of their own life again. It's laughing genuinely again, feeling ambition again, feeling light again without depending on someone else's attention to experience it. And the crazy part is that people often notice this shift without a single word being spoken. Because emotionally free people carry a different kind of presence. They don't look desperate to be chosen. They don't beg for connection. They don't panic in the face of distance. And many women feel that even if they never openly admit it. Deep down, men who truly moved on become unforgettable precisely because they stopped chasing people trying to be remembered. They simply kept living their lives. And ironically, that's exactly when everything started changing. Conclusion. At the end of the day, the men who truly win after heartbreak are not the loudest ones. They're not the guys trying to prove something online every single day. They're the men who quietly rebuilt themselves while nobody was watching. And maybe that's the question every man watching this needs to ask himself right now. Are you still emotionally trapped in your past? Or are you finally becoming the version of yourself that pain was trying to create all along? Because the moment a man stops chasing validation, his entire life starts changing. So don't just watch this video and move on. Apply it. Build your body. Strengthen your mind. Protect your peace. Become the kind of man who no longer needs to beg for love, attention, or approval. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever noticed people treating you differently after you truly moved on? Drop your experience in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because this channel is for men who are done being emotionally weak and ready to become stronger in every area of life. We're also on the road to 1,000 subscribers, so help us reach that goal and become part of this community before it explodes.